What is that thing that like nudges you along to try to make a difference, or that you want to have and be remembered for?
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision. What's next? It's a topic we have explored from several different angles this season on Status Go. What's next for your company? What's next for your department? Today, we're going to talk about what's next for you. This is Jeff Tunn, your host of Status Go. One of the most valuable what's next steps I took in my career was to hire an executive coach. For me, it was a game changer and completely changed the trajectory of my career. Having a coach is something I recommend to anyone seeking to grow professionally and personally for that matter. Today, we're going to talk with Brad Finkeldei, President of Career Confidence. Brad's focus is on helping IT professionals to stop second guessing themselves and become the leader of their careers. What sets Brad apart from many career coaches is that he is a recovering IT professional. So he has been there, done that. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thanks, Jeff. You make me feel bad for having all these devices around me: my iPad, my iPhone, my computer.
So maybe you're not quite a recovering IT professional, Brad. Maybe you still have that in your blood.
I go to my meetings every Tuesday.
So, Brad, I'd love to start with your story. I'd love to understand people's journey and what got them to where they are. So, what led you originally to IT as a profession? And then, what experience led you down the path to become a career coach to IT pros?
Well, I'll give you the shorter version, but with some detail.
That sounds great.
I could start back way in the '70s when my parents made me, but that would take a while. Um, the So I've always had like a love for gadgets, and my dad was a gadget guy, and we bonded over just how things work and taking things apart and like building things. And I remember watching like Mr. Science, or not Mr. Science, Mr. Wizard growing up.
Oh, yeah.
And that just kind of unfolded. And then I went to college and focused on IT. Actually, I had my degree in telecommunications management, which was basically an IT degree, but it was with a focus on telecommunications. And so that led me into my career. And my first job was in management and at AT&T, and I was working with a bunch of technicians and people in a call center, and they were fixing DSL issues over the phone and helping people with their computers. And that led me into, really going down the rabbit hole of technology. And then I got into like web engineering roles and working the back end of servers. And I did that like the span of my career, a big chunk of it, in the deeper depths of like IT work, working in the back end for about 10 years. First year was in 3 years of management. And as I look at my career now, I know why I'm coaching. I know why I'm, helping people on a more personal levels, because I think, a higher spiritual level, God like actually aligned me up in the beginning to work with people.
Yeah.
And then I got involved, meaning my ego. And I was trying to make a turn for money, and I didn't know it, but I still loved it. So it all made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me get to a point where I was making, really good money in IT. And I had bought the house, I'd had the nice car, and I had all the stuff, but I just wasn't really fulfilled on the inside. And I reached out to a life coach, and this is my first experience
Okay.
being coached. And after about 2 hours, this woman looked at me and she said, "I can tell you're not very confident as a person, and you're using your paycheck to impress people." And
Wow,
it
that's
was,
cutting to the chase right away, isn't it?
yeah, it took me.
Mm.
It's still taking me some time to realize. It's been
Uh-huh.
several years. And so that led me into, like really starting into like this like self-discovery and like really reflecting on what is it I really care about? What is it I really want to do? What is it I want to be remembered for? And I eventually got into coaching, and then eventually realized like, hey, I like helping the people that are just like me,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
love technology, but have had an issue where they, afraid to speak up for themselves, or they have a bigger vision, but they're not sure how to do it, and they keep second guessing themselves. So that's how things kind of get kicked off, so to speak.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
now I get to help people do. I get to figure that out, and I get to call people out now too.
yeah,
Whenever I work
yeah.
with them.
Yeah. So I find that fascinating because you could have you could have done somewhat of a reversal and gone back into management and potentially fed that side of your personality, that part of your being. But instead, you chose the route of individual coaching. Have you explored why you chose coaching over going back into management?
Yeah, I think at that time, I looked at it and it was really I wanted to travel, and I think a lot of people come to this. They're like, I'm tired of corporate America. I want to go do my own thing, and I want to create something. And that was it. Like that was the main decision point of like I want to go build my own thing. I want to go do my own thing, um, and that's what led me to starting my own company.
And how long have you been doing this part of your career now?
I got my certification in 2015, so it's been about five years now. So
Awesome, awesome,
yeah.
awesome. So when we were first introduced a couple of weeks ago, we jumped on a phone call just to kind of get to know each other a bit, and stunningly, we got on the topic of leadership because that's one of my passions, and I know that's one of yours as well. Uh, and but I loved one of the words that you used, and that was clarity. Can you talk about clarity and why is it important? And then I'll go ahead and add part two into that. How do you guide your clients to come to clarity?
Yeah, I think clarity is real important because if you're not clear on where you want to go, how are you supposed to get there, right?
Hmm.
And this is a perfect example. This has nothing to do with tech, but it's perfect on accomplishing anything, or really creating any kind of mission. Last week, I took a quote unquote vacation, and I went to Denver, and I helped a friend restore an older RV. And when I got there, he had really not done a whole lot. And he kind of sat on it for the last 6 months. Now, COVID happened and a lot of things have shifted and
Yeah, yeah.
changed. But what wasn't there for him was, what am I actually going to do with this thing? What am I going to
Uh,
build? How do I want it to look when I'm done? And I walked in, and I had already restored one, last year. And I walked in, and I shared a few ideas, and I started poking at him a little bit, and kind of doing a little bit of my coaching thing with him. And within a day, we had an idea, and we are on it, and we were working, and we were breaking things apart, and painting the ceiling, and painting the roof, and like starting to really go to town on the vision of what he wanted it to be. And that's exactly what I get to do with my clients. I don't I don't like break them apart, or anything.
right, right.
uh, but in a sense, I help them really reflect on their life and what they really care about, and what they want, what they want their life and their career to stand for. And but what do you really want your life to stand for, and how can you stand behind it? And when we work together, I help them flesh out that stuff. And then we go to work. We go on the harder inner work of like, okay, let's start to come up with a plan and some
Yeah,
of the mindset needed to accomplish this goal of yours as a career vision.
So the clarity is in the clarity of the career goal, or the, I'll use air quotes that nobody can see. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't mean that facetiously as it sounds. It's what do you want to do? Um,
Yeah.
right. So you help them gain that clarity. What are some of the steps you guide them through? Sorry, to help come to that clarity, whether it's renovating an RV or renovating a career.
Yeah, well, it would be cool if everybody wanted to renovate an RV. I'd love to help out. It's just kind of like a little side passion project that I've found in my own process. Like as a coach, you go through your own processes, and I
Hmm.
found like I love restoring things, and that's actually one of the drivers for me is like restoring things. But the process that I take people through um, is a deeper inner reflection in the beginning, and I ask them a bunch of questions, and they go through a bunch of exercises and a few personal, like a personality assessment, and also a strength finder assessment.
Hmm.
um, and I also take them back a little bit into their childhood about like what they love to do as a kid.
Hmm.
And when my clients get to start to reflect on some of that, that starts to bring up some things for them. And some things, what I am driving for is, what do you really, really, really care about? What is
Yeah.
that thing that like nudges you along to try to make a difference, or um, that you want to have and be remembered for? Like a real clear example, and also a very stretch, is like Elon Musk, right? He's got a
Yeah.
really clear vision of changing the world to be, uh, you know, changing climate change and becoming more, what's the word I'm looking for? Sustainable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really clear for him. Those drivers are like, this is what gets me up. This is what I'm going to do today. This is where we're going. And anything that fits inside of that model, he's like, yes, I want to help, produce this. A lot of people don't have that for themselves. And once I help my clients like create a North Star, so to speak. And once they have that, that gives them the clarity to go out and make the decisions that they need to make and have the conversations they need to have. And that gives them trajectory, that gives them confidence, and then they start moving. And then I just help them along the way, and like kind of let the bumpers, along the bowling alley, so to speak. I just keep
Yeah.
them on path.
Well, but some people, you're absolutely right, and I can say I fell into that as well. Man, when I started my career in IT, I was uh, a developer. We didn't call ourselves developers back then; we called ourselves programmers.
Mhm.
Uh, but I smashed code. That's what I did, and that's what I was going to do my entire career. I nothing more. I loved it, loved it. And I had a couple of friends. I didn't have a coach at that time, but I had a couple of friends that kept telling me I needed to go into management, and I kind of got drug kicking and screaming into it, and found out that that's where my passion is. So accidentally, I wish I'd had a coach to point that out back then. I later hired a coach to help grow in my career. Once I got into management, I wanted, there's a huge difference, right, between management and leadership, and I wanted to be in leadership. I wanted to extend my leadership skills, and so I hired a coach to do that. But people need help identifying that so that they can get on course. And I love how you described it about keeping them. You're the guardrails to help them uh, focus on what it is that they're after, so they don't lose track of what you have worked so hard to help them find that clarity. So I think that's a great approach.
Yeah, it makes a difference. Once you know what you want and where to go. Sometimes we don't always know the how,
Hmm.
but as soon as we get clear on it, we can then see opportunities. I had a client 2 weeks ago. That's about 3 weeks ago. She got really clear on what she wanted, and then just started updating a few things, not really putting herself out there a whole lot.
Hmm.
They reached out to her.
Oh, wow, wow.
Yeah.
That that's a great success story. I know you can't use names of your clients, but can you share? You've been working with IT professionals as a coach for 5 years. Can you share some typical stories with us? Are there some themes that you see recurring in IT professionals?
Yeah, fear,
Fear?
fear, second guessing. I literally, this is funny, Jeff. I literally just got a text from I guess a friend slash client, um, and he's been so hesitant to have a discussion with his people at work about. He got really clear just a few weeks ago, like I want to be a trainer, but he hasn't been able to share that or articulate that with his management. And the text was, and just like that, now I'm in discussions with my manager about training and becoming a trainer.
Funny how that happens, isn't it?
Funny, like our fear, like the common thing, what you're just asking is like the common thing is fear, right? And fear obscures us from really going after what we think it really obscures us from going after what we want because we think in our brains, especially the analytical ones out there, have come up with all the answers. If I go talk to my boss, oh my god, they're going to fire me,
Yep.
they're going to know I'm going to want to leave, and then they don't do anything. They never go actually have an honest real conversation. um, and one of my like favorite stories is one of my first clients a few years ago. um, she came to me and we worked together. Now she wasn't an IT professional, but it was in the same realm. She really wanted to spend more time with her kids, with her daughter. Actually, just she just had one daughter, and but she was scared to have this conversation with them at work because she's like, I'm going to go find another job where I can just work remotely, but they don't want anybody to work remote. And I said, well, hold on. Let's just think about this for a moment. Like, what do you really want? Where do you want to really go? Do you actually like the place where you're working? And she was like, yeah, I actually really like it. I can't work from home. I don't have that much time to spend with my daughter. It's really making an impact. And I see how important that is for my family life. And I'm willing to make a sacrifice for my family. And I said, okay. And then we went into, this other discussion. Oh, okay, so are you a good employee there? She goes, yeah, yeah. They look to me for a lot. And I said, okay, cool. So you've got a lot of really good things going. And so I coached her how to go have a conversation with her management saying, hey, this is what's going on in my life. Like, this is where I'm at. Like, this is where I want to go. And right now, the way I see it, I can't go to where I want to go because I see some things that aren't possible. And at the end of this, conversation, this happened over a little bit of time. She ended up being able to work remotely more often. Like they didn't let anybody do it then. This is a few years ago. So they opened up to her for that. They gave her a 2-month vacation because she was planning to go on it anyway. She was just ready to quit. Um, and she, and she got a promotion out of it. And it was, she was just really happy that she didn't have to quit. She got to keep doing what she was doing. She didn't have to leave the company and start all over someplace. And all she had to do was really just have a couple conversations. And that's been a theme with several of my clients where they get really clear, and then they go have these conversations, and then they realize like, oh, my boss actually would kill to keep me.
Those are great success stories when you go have that conversation and you find out, well, gee, if only I'd had that conversation a month or two ago. So if fear is one of the most common themes that you see, the cousin to that has got to be false stories that we end up telling ourselves. So, what are some false stories that you've seen in your clients that they maybe overanalyze the situation and come up with things that aren't even there?
Oh, yeah. That happens all the time. And I think everybody's got these. I've got these. It's called the ego. And unless you can remove your brain, you're going to have it, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so those false stories, they really hold so many of us back. So one of my clients recently, he was an AWS engineer, and when we started working together, he really wanted, he was ready to quit. Like he was like, this isn't going to work out. This place isn't going the way I want it. Like their values are not mine. And when we got down to it, he was in the sales part of the organization, and he was not a salesperson. He was more of a trainer, you know?
Mhm.
And he really wanted, when he went through the process with me, he really wanted to be that trainer. Like, hey, I want to teach people this stuff. I don't want to sell it. I want to teach them how to do this. And I want to teach them how to build, and configure servers with AWS, and how to actually have a strategy of going, into the cloud. Right. And by the time we got done working, he realized, wait a minute, I'm actually probably one of the most senior people here. I actually love teaching this stuff. My only thing that's holding me back is actually speaking up for myself. But when he does speak up for himself, boy, he shows up awesome. So
Mhm.
he saw this false story of like, I can't speak up for myself. I'm not that good of a teacher. I'm not that good of a leader. And I had him look at other parts of his life where he was actually a volunteer at his church, and he ran this one part of the organization in the church for years. He was a leader. I said, wait a minute, where's this person in your career? I
Yeah.
go, where's the block there for you? And he realized where the block was. And then he realized that was not really present at work. It was just a false story of him thinking something might happen. A lot of times people won't want to make a move because if I get fired, oh God, if they find out, then I'm going to lose the house. And then our egos go into this like, like tornado of like the world's going to end. Like if you go have one conversation with your boss, who's normally the nicest person in the world and would never hurt a fly, now they're definitely going to fire you, right? If
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
this conversation. And that fear, all those false stories, just like put up like a whole like concrete roadblock in front of you, and you're like, oh, I can't do that. I just better stay here and not do anything. It's
Yeah.
better if I just die here, you know.
No, no, it really isn't. Don't do
No,
that.
it's
Don't do that.
not.
So, what are the traps or the triggers that you see in some of the folks that you work with that maybe create those false stories, those false negatives, create the fear? Are there some common traps or triggers?
um I would say, I guess, some of the common ones, just like what I was just sharing, is like, hey, they might think I'm gonna quit, right? They
Hmm.
might think I'm going to leave, or whatever, or they're going to fire me if I have this kind of conversation. And that's not the case, right? And if you can come from the perspective of a hiring manager or a director or an executive, they've got to manage people. And one of the process of managing people is people move from job to job. People are progressing through life, and that's part of the process.
Hmm.
um, but there's this thing in our egos that thinks that it's like a permanence. Like once I get this position, I'm going to stay here forever. Like it's
I've
not.
had several last jobs.
Yeah, this is it forever.
Uh-huh.
But if you look at the world, it's always changing. We're always evolving. The only thing that is constant in life is change, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And when we can realize that, when people can understand that and get that reflection for them, and be like, you're eventually, something's going to happen. They're going to change the department. The company's growing, the company's downsizing, or whatever. Something's going to change along the way. So once they have that realization, it makes it easier for them to see like, oh, I probably should have this conversation. And then
Yeah.
I nudge them along like, did you book the call?
Oh,
Here's some tips.
that's great, Brad. Yeah, yeah. Hold them accountable. So I want to circle back to clarity for just a second, and uh, we were just talking about the traps or the triggers. Is it possible that someone has clarity on what it is they want to do, and it's kind of crystal clear for them, but these traps are preventing them from either reaching full clarity or reaching for that vision.
So, what's the question underneath that? Share more about that. I'm not sure. I want to find out where you want to
So,
go with this.
so you help people reach clarity. We were talking about that at the beginning, and
Mhm.
we've now talked about fear and the uncertainties and all the reasons why you shouldn't reach for that vision. Um, can do those traps even stop someone from being able to reach that level of clarity? I guess the question is, have you run into someone that has so many of these traps and triggers built in that you have to unpack those first before you can start working on them reaching clarity?
Oh, I see what you're asking. Like, hey, like I don't even know what I want to do, and I'm still kind of tied up with. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah,
I guess
and
I wasn't very clear on my question about clarity.
yeah, and it's an organic process when I work with someone. The engineer in me wants to make it a systematic, like organize, like go to step one, and then we'll have your vision, and then we'll do all this, and as much as I can, I'd like to do that, right? But sometimes I do find that people are actually having blocks, and I've got a client right now where he's stuck on the process of like, what do I really care about? you know what is it? And sometimes there's cultural issues there where sometimes you get so um, that person or that culture can drive a belief into them, and that may not be where their heart wants to go, but because it's been so driven into them, it makes it hard for them to see outside of that.
Hmm.
So, an example of that is you could look at, like, just for an example, like the Indian culture. It's very common in the Indian culture. You're going to be in the medical field, you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to go into IT. You don't have any
Hmm.
other choice but those two, right? So, if someone comes to me and they want to go and be a dog trainer, I'm going to be the one who's listening for that inside of their stories, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we break apart. Okay, so I really hear that you want to be a dog trainer, and that's what makes you most passionate, right? Now, from that standpoint, they've already put years of effort into where they're at. I may not direct them like, go quit your job tomorrow and let's get you on the dog training path. We'll come up with a bigger and better strategy. To
Hmm.
maybe it's something you try for a while. Maybe you still get to be in IT and work with dogs on the side or something like that. We'll work together, but they'll have clarity as to like, wow, this really drives me and I need to add this into my life because it's
Yeah.
more fulfilling, for me when I'm doing this type of work, say as if it's like working with dogs or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how you help them unravel their stories, because some of us might have our stories are so complex and so multi-layered. Probably a lot of people are that way, but um, being able to reach that point of clarity, you've got to unravel those stories. And those are some of the things that you work with your clients to help them as they unravel those stories.
Yeah. So a perfect example of that is an engineering student that I was coaching probably about 3 months ago, and uh, I asked him, I said, okay, so this is an engineering student, like PhD level. So not just, not just, 4 year degree, but, 6, 8 year degree into chemical and like chemical engineering, basically, something like that.
Hmm.
It was above my pay grade. Um, but where I came in is I knew where some fear was showing up, and then I could see some of these blocks for him. And I said, why do you care about, going to work for the oil and gas company? And he said, well, I really care about the environment. And I said, okay, well, that's cool. A lot of people
Uh-huh.
care about the environment, but I want to know why, and I said, well, take me back to the moment where you really started caring about the environment. Now, this is where me personally and where the ego it gets in the way. What we care about a lot usually has emotions wrapped in it and wrapped around it and through it. And sometimes we don't want to revisit those emotions because they're painful or we haven't processed them fully. And one of the things I help my clients understand is that it's okay to go back to these stories because there's golden nuggets there of like what's been driving you your whole life. And so uh, for this engineering student, I took him through the process and he shared his story with me. And he said, you know what? He goes, when I was a kid, we moved around a lot because my dad was in the military. And there's his favorite thing for me to do is to play in the woods behind this one house. And I loved it. And it was really cool. And we moved away. And 2 years later, we came back. And I remember the day when we came back because they had like cut down and gotten rid of all the woods where he played.
Oh,
And he said, that was it. That was the moment I really started caring about the environment. He goes, something around bulldozers, probably not liking them very much right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I said, that's it, man. I said, that's where your passion comes from. This is what's you've been going to school for the past 6, 8 years in a really high degree, to get a high level degree because you care that much.
Hmm.
And when he got really clear on that, something clicked. And I said, that's your story. That's what you get to tell in the interview process. That's what you get to tell in your networking process. That's what you get to
Yeah,
tell, people out there is like, this is why I care about this. And that gives people a place to stand from and also be heard, understood, and stand out in the same process while you're going there.
yeah.
This person now is like, wow, that's not just Bob the engineer, with a degree from Stanford. It's Bob the guy who like, man, they stole his childhood, and this is why he really cares.
Well, and it's that passion, the passionate retelling of that story that can set you apart as a candidate for being hired for a job because you tell that story so passionately that the company can't help but say, "Yes, we want you on the team."
Yeah. You don't even have to tell it passionately because a lot of engineers and nerds are not storytellers. Um, they could be that could be a bias,
Uh-huh.
but it does. Even if they just tell it just how they tell it, and it still can leave something for the other person to feel and to be under and to understand about that person,
Mhm.
and it really does help them stand out.
So, Brad, as you know, we are all about action here on Status Go. That's right in our name, right? Go. So, how can our listeners put all of this into action? What are one or two things they can do tomorrow because they listened to us today?
Well, the vision I just kind of popped in my head was like, take time to really think about what is it you want to be, not have, you won't have a regret about later in life. And I'm not saying you have to go out and do that thing, but spend some time to reflect and be like, do I really want to go down this route? Do I really want to do this? Would this, be exciting or bring a lot of joy to me? And if the answer is yes, it's worth your time to investigate to see if that's a pathway for you.
Hmm.
And what I like to remind people of is like, if you're sitting there and you're an engineer and you're a programmer, but you've got a passion for, training dogs, um, it, it's it's your responsibility to make that choice for your life. Like no one else is going to do it for you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And to at least explore what that would look like, to explore if that's a good decision for you and where you're at in your life, even if it's just like, what, I'm going to do this as a hobby, just to bring some more joy back into my life or whatever it is. Or how can I go work for an organization that does train dogs and use my IT skills there, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think if you do take that time and just ask yourself, what would I regret if I never did it? And just let your mind do its thing. Sometimes it's while you're running or taking a shower or a journaling process. Especially with IT people, a lot of us happen to be really analytical, and we want the 1+1 to equal my answer. And
Uh-huh.
that's not how it works when, there's emotions involved and what we love and what we're passionate about. You have to give some space and time for some of those answers to occur sometimes.
Yeah. Brad, that is great advice for our listeners to pause and just think about what are the things that really drive them? What are their passions? What is their inner purpose? And are they getting those things in their career? And if not, maybe come to that moment of clarity of what that looks like for them. I think that is great advice. I really want to thank you for your time today, Brad, jumping on the podcast and sitting down and talking about it. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I think there's a lot that our listeners can take away from listening to the story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the time as well.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, go to intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Brad Finkeldei. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.